We will call this Brownfield Redevelopment Authority meeting to order for today's date, June 30th, 2025. Secretary, would you like to take a roll call of those present?
We don't actually have to take the roll call. I just take attendance.
Attendance, rigor. It looks like you don't want to call them?
No.
Okay. So first order of business, as you can see, I am not Jeff Budd, and he is unable to attend today's meeting. We need to make a motion or have a motion held to have a vice chair who would then step into this role in the future. Anybody who would like to point across the aisle and nominate a vice chair?
We promise we'll make it easy on you if you, if we can at least nominate and vote, approve someone.
I nominate Eric Beckhausen, who I just met, as the vice chair of the Coldwater Brownfield Authority.
I second that motion. And we'll hurry up and vote before he.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
That's what's going on.
All right, we have a nomination and a second, and we'll take a vote. The ayes, if you'd like to vote in the affirmative.
Aye.
Any nays? It is so ordered. Congratulations, you are now vice chair.
Two outlaws here.
Next up on the agenda is the approval of the last Brownfield Board meeting minutes from March 13th, 2025. Is there any changes or amendments to those meeting minutes? Please speak now, or if somebody would like to approve those, please make a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second, anybody?
I'll second.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have bylaws.
The vote, the actual.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm never in this position.
Yes.
We would like to vote on approving those last meeting minutes. Speak now if you'd like to vote in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes. We'll move on to the second agenda item, approval of the last bylaws that may or may not exist, but have been updated for this board as it hadn't met in quite some time until recently. Any questions or comments on those bylaws as they were presented?
The treasurer and the secretary, could you explain that?
Sure. So under the law, there's some options to create positions that are outside of the board members that help the board. The secretary position is primarily for keeping accounts and records. The treasurer position speaks to the ability to, if the city wanted to have a revolving fund in the future, that person would manage those assets. Those revolving funds can be used to finance future projects. In turn, it can then take capture and those sorts of things. It can also be used to pay back the city for its time in reviewing work plans and things like that. As of right now, we don't have a revolving fund, but we're kind of looking to the future of possibilities of how the board could grow, as there seems to be interest in pursuing housing opportunities in the city with changes in law that allowed for the capture that wasn't previously allowed.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions about the bylaws? Seeing none, is there anybody who would like to make a motion to approve those?
I'll make the motion to approve the bylaws as presented.
There a second?
Support.
Okay. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes. All right, great. We are now moving on to, as was alluded, foreshadowing, number 3, appointment of a recording secretary. As proposed, it's presently presented as appointing Shauna Chavez, our city clerk, as that person to track the meeting minutes and take official records and those sorts of matters.
I'll make the motion to appoint.
Okay. Any support?
I'll second. Support.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. Excellent. Next, we have appointment resolution number 2504. This is for appointment of a director of the Brownfield Authority. As proposed, it would be the city manager, Keith Baker. He, in his role, would be the support liaison to this board, work with developers in developing the plans, presenting those to you, helping developers get to that stage, because sometimes people are new to these stages, and understanding what the tax consequences are. And as we recently went through what are debt millages and which ones aren't, and helping get to the stage where it's ready for a presentation to you guys. With that, is there any questions about that one? No, seeing none. Anybody want to make a motion to appoint Keith Baker to that role of director?
I'll motion to appoint Keith Baker to the role of director.
Okay, a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays, motion passes. And that moves us to item number 5, appointment of a treasurer as presented. Resolution 2505 is to appoint our finance director as that role of treasurer. As noted in there, it's to keep track of financial records, particularly if the city was to move forward in creating a revolving fund, but mainly tracking the capture process and keeping finances accounted for, as this process does have a lot of financial implications to the city and other taxing jurisdictions. Any questions about that particular position? Seeing none, anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, a second?
I'll second.
All right, with that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any nays? Motion carries. This takes us up to our exciting point of the meeting, a discussion of Carriage Circle. This is proposed redevelopment of a former site that had started and then stalled. We have a developer present here who is interested in using the new Brownfield Housing Authority tax capture options, and they are here to present on that. So I will turn it over to them, and then we can have a broader discussion.
Good afternoon. Thanks for coming together this afternoon to consider this project. My name is Brian Papke for the Redstone Group, our headquarters in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'd like Joe introduce himself. Yeah, hi, Joe Augustinelli, Managing Director of Michigan Growth Advisors. We're a economic development incentive consulting company owned by Miller Johnson, which is a large law firm based in Grand Rapids. I work at our Kalamazoo office, and excited to be here today. Been spending a lot of time with Keith and the city team over the last, 2 years probably, talking about housing TIF, and excited to have a project moving forward with you all today. So let Brian get into the details on the project, and then I'll walk through the Brownfield plan, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Thanks, Joe. Do you have any materials in front of you in terms of the plans or site plans?
They have the plan, they have the site plan.
Okay.
What we didn't include is the architectural drawing, but
Okay. Yeah, well, if you wouldn't mind, I got 6 copies here. Maybe you can just kind of reference as I discuss the project a little bit, if you wouldn't mind. There's a site plan and a kind of example architectural set, the second page.
Zoom out.
So. Yeah, so we're very excited to be here. I think we've kind of, Redstone Group, we've been looking around Michigan and Northern Indiana for projects of this nature for some time now. And I think an opportunity came across our plate with this property here, which was especially appealing because it's kind of got, it's so-called shovel ready. You know, it's a project that has got utilities, roads, kind of a lot of accommodations that wouldn't take us a year to get going into the project. We can get into it fairly quickly. I think as we saw the opportunity come up, we sort of dug into Coldwater a little bit, and none of us knew much about it. And I think maybe Joe was the first one who called my attention to the fact that there's a lot of job growth here, both future and current need for housing as a result of the fairly robust job market down here, which is kind of was new to me. And as we dug into it more, we discovered that as well. And I think that made this project very appealing. So we wanted to get right into it. So let me go through the project just a little bit, what we're going to propose. I see you have the site plan on the screen. So basically we're taking the existing road, which is currently a public road, and converting 2/3 of it into, or sorry, 3/4 of it into a private road, which would be parked basically. So it's kind of like a expanded, kind of elaborated on drive-through kind of parking lot, kind of circling the site. And then we add additional kind of stubs 90 degrees to that, which would handle all the parking for the project. So in general, the concept is a lot of little buildings. I think we're trying to create some appeal here that is not present in some of the other rental projects in the area in two ways. One is just being architecturally appealing. And secondly, we have a higher bedroom counts in general. We have all 2 and 3 bedrooms, 100% in this project. Part of that is to try to give people options, I guess, even if they don't have all those kids in the house or that many people in the household, they still have an extra room for an office, things like that. Kind of just gives them more flexibility and maybe more appeal. They could have a 3-bedroom and 2 of the bedrooms being used and one being as a home office or something like that. So I think the architectural appeal is something I like to focus on. I'm an architect by background, so I think getting in the development world, I like to focus on things that are interesting and architecturally appealing. And I think being attainable housing doesn't have to mean that it's looks bad. So I think, so my thrust in this project is, is to create some really nice architecture in these buildings, a really pleasant community, lots of trees, heavy landscaping. We'll be doing some carports with inside the parking. And we'll have a dog park, playground, and then some kind of community building, which we're working on the program for right now, which will be an option for people to have events and do some community barbecues and things like that. Trying to think anything else. We're talking 3-story buildings here. They're all mostly, I'd say, 4 plexes, shared stair in the middle, 3 stories, but designed to look like 2. If you look at the second page, I think that's really the architecture we're going for, is more residential scale, I guess you'd say, where it's, it is a commercial building, but designed to look residential, like home-like. So without spending too much time, and I tend to err on that side. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I'd let Joe speak next.
Yeah. Any questions on the development itself before I get into the nuts and bolts of what's in the Brownfield plan and the request before you? I don't think we talked about number of units. Total number of units is 228 units, mix of 2s and 3s. 109 of those are 2s, 95 are 3-bedroom units.
So that's an update from the previous, because some of the older information did have a few 1-bedroom units identified, so, okay.
Yeah.
So Shauna, can you switch to the overhead camera? Then we can broadcast the architectural drawing.
You.
That's fancy. Turn it 90.
I see it.
There you go.
Yay.
Hey. You want to describe what's going on?
Sure. Yep. So as I kind of started to describe, I don't know if you can zoom in just a little bit, maybe, that each building is, if I discount the fact there's a couple connected buildings right now, but most buildings are like this, which is what I call a 4-plex, because it's 4 units per level. And it has a shared common access stair in the middle. So if you reference like this, this is the ground floor. So you come in a common lobby and then up a stair. So basically all the doors are within this corridor. So this is like unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, unit 4, and they each have an exit entry door. So this would be a conditioned space with some storage lockers in there. It's fairly generous. It's 10 feet wide, to be kind of open, airy, plenty of elbow room in there. So, no basement. So going up, as you get to the second level, this space converts into a bedroom because you don't need that entry in the upper level. And then again, you have 4 doors, each accessing a quadrant of this building. And then up again, one more floor to the same floor plan as the second. One of the goals of these smaller buildings is more windows, more open, more airy, kind of to compete with, a lot of what happens in the apartment world is these buildings get really long and skinny, and there becomes a lot of interior units with just one window wall. So I think what we've been working on quite a bit with some construction folks is trying to figure out how to get our prices down to a point where we can build more smaller buildings at the same efficiency as one larger building. So that's really the concept we're working on here. As I mentioned, we're trying to make this look like it's a sort of the upper levels like built into the roof, kind of like a traditional home that back when I started my career, I worked as an architect in the East Coast. We did a lot of Hamptons, Connecticut homes and stuff. And it kind of reminds me of maybe a little of that coastal style or like East Coast where you've got the upper level is in the dormered space above. So that's really the look we're going for here. Like a modern farmhouse as well. Any questions about the layout you see?
How did you arrive at the allocation? You're talking about different bedrooms and the allocation of that. How did that come about?
Sure, it's really as a result of this floor plan multiplied. So if you look at this, like the light color ones are 2 bedrooms. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 2 bedrooms, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 3 bedrooms on each 12-unit building. So it's like whatever 60% 2 bedrooms. And so that's that same percentage expanded on the whole project. And there's some of the buildings are combined, which basically is taking 2 of these buildings and putting them together.
So it was done on design versus need?
Well, it was designed for that need. Like one thing is, just one of the design parameters that we came up with early is we saw demand for more bedroom count. Some of the adjacent projects, and it's probably 400 and some units worth it, not a single 3-bedroom in both of those projects, and more 1 bedrooms than 2s. And I think we basically wanted to, in using this kind of square layout, we can do a more efficient plan that doesn't have a hallway going down. So we basically save on the hallway space and saving on the hallway space, we can add a bedroom basically. And the same square footage that would be in a unit that would, so I don't think I have the square footages on here. But almost in the same square footage as a 2-bedroom in a lot of places. We have 3 bedrooms in our 3-bedroom unit here. So part of the goal is to try to create 2 window walls that are very efficient and high bedroom count to give people options for home offices and things like that. So it was really identifying that there's no 3 bedrooms around here and trying to figure out how we could create a plan that was more bedrooms than less in general, as compared to the competition with the demand we've seen.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Shauna, can you switch us back over?
Right. So happy to walk through some of the Brownfield plan details. So I believe this board has seen a housing TIF project before, right, Keith? When I'm not starting from scratch on education here. All right, good. That's usually where I start, and almost every community we are working in, because this is a new tool that is new to most communities as we're coming forward. So
I will say that it's still new, but it's only the second.
All right.
And probably
fair. Yeah.
the most detailed yet. So.
Yeah. So as a refresher, the big change in the statute that happened about 3 years ago was the creation of housing property as eligible property. No longer do you have to be contaminated, blighted, functionally obsolete to use the Brownfield program. The legislature recognized this massive need for housing in the state and created a new way to qualify for the program, that being housing property, which means anything with a housing unit on it or proposed to be on it now qualifies. So that's how this project is qualifying as housing property. The legislature also created a new set of eligible activities. So under the old rules, you could only use the TIF dollars to reimburse environmental cleanup, demolition, lead and asbestos abatement, site preparation, and public infrastructure. So under these new rules, you can still do all of those things. And it allows you to reimburse private infrastructure improvements. So in a development like this, that's a lot of your parking areas, your sewer and water connections. It could include, I don't think we have any in here, but solar panels, EV charging stations, sort of green infrastructure is an eligible activity. And then the big sort of game changer, I think, was the creation of an eligible activity called the financing gap associated with the construction of affordable housing, or the housing gap is what it's generally known as. So that allows us to use TIF dollars to effectively exchange rent for TIF for units where the developer agrees to income restrict and rent and income restrict tenants for a certain segment of the development. So this project's proposing about 30% of the units, 68 units in total, would be affordable, restricted to an average area median income of 90% of AMI spread out amongst those units. And that's really the bulk of the TIF in the Brownfield plan, again, because this already has a lot of infrastructure built to it. It really allows us to drive the more affordable units into the deal than you typically would see. As we're modeling these projects around the state, we're working on a bunch of them with Brian and other clients, probably 40 or 50 of them right now. Kind of the sweet spot we see on a project where you need to develop the site from a greenfield with the infrastructure costs and the gap subsidy, you can usually get to about 20% affordable, 80% market rate. We're able to do about double or 50% more affordability here because a lot of the site infrastructure is already there. And so those TIF dollars can be used to fund the gap subsidy instead of infrastructure, which is great. Overall, the plan is proposing a duration of 16 years. I want to check myself on that. 16 years total of reimbursement to the developer. As mentioned previously, the plan would shut off at year 16 and would not capture to the local Brownfield revolving fund. That was a request of the cities. Ultimately, if you decided in the future you wanted to establish one of those funds, you could certainly amend the plan at a later date and continue the capture for more years. We are total eligible activities is if you look at table 1 of the Brownfield plan, is sort of that's the meat and potatoes of sort of what you're funding. If you click on the left of your screen there, it's like 2 down from the highlighted one. There you go. So yeah, about 1.6 million of infrastructure costs, again, curb and gutter, landscaping, some street lighting, roads through the development, parking areas, utility connections, things like that. Engineering and design of eligible activities is also an eligible activity. So the soft costs related to those items are eligible. And then the other big category, site preparations. That's a lot of the earthwork, moving dirt around, clearing and grubbing of the site, geotechnical engineering, a lot of your temporary facilities, so construction, job site trailers, porta-johns, soil erosion control, things like that. And then, as you can see, the big number is the gap subsidy, which is about $14.5 million of the request. And that's what allows us to drive those affordable rents and limit our tenant pool to people making on average at or below 90% of area median income. Total plan eligible activity is about 19 million. We're currently modeling that we won't quite fully reimburse that over 16 years. if our projections are right, and I tell all my clients this, the only thing I can guarantee you is our projections will be wrong. I don't know if inflation is going to be higher than 2% or lower. It'll probably go up and down, and there's no chance it'll be a flat line at 2%. But this is getting us pretty close to fulfilling the full eligible activities. So we're really excited about the project, and would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about projects itself or the Brownfield plan to move forward. Well, maybe before we get their timeline, maybe Brian, if this gets approved.
We are talking about late fall this year, depending on the timeline, which was part of the advantage I mentioned about the fact that the road's already in, it's ready to go. I think we're talking to my construction team, and we're talking to, in all likelihood, Copper Rock Construction. They're the ones who built the two adjacent properties, and they're very familiar with the contractor base around here and everybody they use to build just this kind of product in this market. So they are available at mid to late fall. So hopefully we can get right into it.
Which would get you your first occupancies.
Let's see. Hopefully very early spring 27, or it depends if we want to bring it to fall 26 or early 27.
I'll stop asking the questions now. I'll let you guys jump in.
So I asked questions. So, in this presentation, I did not see a total capture for Branch County. Can you tell me what the total capture is for the county?
What's the total volume of millage captured for the county millage?
Yeah, what are you taking for the county for?
Yes,
this
stand
plan?
by. That is in the tax increment revenue capture table, which is table 2 of the Brownfield plan. County millage is 4.6 mils. So that's the third line down. Total capture would be 1.6 million and change over the 16-year period.
And I see this is over 30 acres or 30 units per acre. Does that meet your density, Keith?
I don't know it offhand, but it's less than what currently exists at other properties, so.
And
it's zoned multifamily, so.
Oh, okay.
So yes, it's already zoned from a land use standpoint in compliance with what they're proposing.
And in a number of brownfields that I've been involved with, the interest rate has been closer to 3% on those. Is it typical for the city to allow the 5%?
There again, this is the second one. We do have pilots which are just based essentially, the percentage rate is set is by what the financials dictate. Maybe defer to Tom if he has any comment as to the interest rate. I'm not familiar with that, so.
Keith, if I could jump in on that, just on sort of what you see in other brownfield authorities around the state. So the interest rate is talking about the developers carrying costs on, costs they're incurring today, getting paid back over time, is certainly a lot higher than 3%. The 3% that some brownfield authorities have established as a cap. Those brownfield authorities like Kalamazoo is a good example. I was the chair of that board when we established a 3% cap back when interest rates were around 3%. And that was sort of the rationale why the state's always set a ceiling at 5%. And that's been in existence for the life of the Brownfield program, 25 years now. And so we're seeing 5% is, given today's interest rate environment, is much more common around the state than a 3% limitation. There's only a couple brownfield authorities that are doing that. And the reason is we're going to borrow at 6.5%, probably thereabouts, higher, 6.5 to 7%. So this interest is helping, but it's certainly not covering the full weight of that interest burden.
And thank you for that. We're in Michigan, like where are your last 2 projects in Michigan? Where have you done those?
Is that directed at me
No,
or Brian?
This being a new program, we haven't executed it yet. The Brownfield TIF, housing TIF, we've not.
Yeah, it's relatively new. I meant
Right.
just projects, not this TIF, but we're at projects that you've done.
A lot in the Grand Rapids area. That's our main focus. Also in the, Battle Creek, Kalamazoo area, we've done quite a few there and ongoing. A lot of Lake Shore as well, kind of Holland area, Grand Haven, Spring Lake. We are looking and working on a couple in the northern Michigan too, like some in potentially Manistee. We've got one up in Lakeview, Michigan, which is a small little town. And talking to some towns of that's smaller scale projects than this, where we're kind of helping them going in and figure out how to provide housing. But a lot of little projects, none quite this large. This is probably 228 is on the high side of what we've built, community size wise.
So there won't be any pilot payment in lieu of taxes that involved with this project then for housing credits at all?
No.
Strictly brownfield?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a much simpler question. And that's why we rely on him for the historical. On the first design, what's the exclusion property that's pointed out? What's,
There's two homes there, and I think at some point it was envisioned that this would be redeveloped as like basically a single family home, like going around both sides of the circle, and then they started to build it. This is probably what, Keith, 20 years ago, maybe these houses were built. So two were built, one of which the developer owns. So basically he's promised to deliver that home vacant and remove it for us. The other home, it sounds like they just don't want to sell. They want to stay there, which I'd probably prefer if we could just, do one big project, but also it doesn't really bother me there either. We're going to landscape around it, and I think they'll be next to the park, and I think it'll feel normal once it's built, in my opinion. But
So I admit I'm confused here. So all these documents, Keith, that I have here, all these pictures, I don't know the town really well yet, but these ones of Amberview Court and all this is from the previous Brownfield, right?
Correct. That was from the minutes of the packet
Okay.
from the
For the
previous
last one.
meeting. So then there's the separate actual plan
Yeah,
for this project was,
at the end.
yes.
Yeah.
So those were just exhibits in the previous meetings packet that are incorporated as the minutes.
Yeah, and just for information on that, this picture here is dated November of 2024 that we had in the previous plan. I don't know why, but the brownfield that you're doing on Shoshone Pass. And there was a house built a year earlier back there. It's not depicted on here.
Well, the aerial itself was older.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I see it's dated November 24th, in November of 2024, but yet the house isn't there. Okay. All right.
Got a quick question. As far as the unit design, is this anything built elsewhere, or will this be the first?
the first, I think we're basically tailoring it for, as you mentioned, asked earlier, that we're trying to figure out how to do more higher bedroom counts without getting the units too large and too expensive. So that was the genesis of, we need more windows. We want to do smaller units to differentiate us between the two larger adjacent projects. So this is new. We're actually looking at this at a lot of places because we're liking how this is looking and performing and all that. So it's new, brand new.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I guess I'll just have a point of clarification. I don't think I had seen your updates since you guys had removed what's before them right now includes the 24 single units. Were there any other changes to the plan aside of moving to the 2 and 3 unit only?
So we received some feedback from city's finance department on we were showing one millage that was actually a debt millage that shouldn't have been captured. So the total volume of TIF over the life of the plan went down by about $300,000 because we were showing a millage that we couldn't capture. But other than that, no other changes.
Design wise, we did some tweaks. I can't remember, pretty recent tweaks where we've been talking to our civil engineer perspective and our builder who Copper Rock, and they have some experience with dealing with stormwater on some of these sites, and they believe that we can provide. We previously showed some stormwater detention areas here, and they believe we can expand on the current facility that is south of Sauk Trail. It's a community kind of stormwater detention. They believe that will be expand that rather than provide it on site, which gave me a little bit more room to spread out the units a little bit more in the site plan.
But what's depicted is relatively inaccurate.
Yep, this is our current, moving forward with engineering on this, that, engineering will probably change this a little bit, but this is still a design plan.
One question. Are there any pass-throughs to the city is involved in this brownfield?
No,
We're not seeking a administration fee, for example, or taking some portion of the capture that would otherwise just extend the length. But Shauna, if you could go back to that, the chart with the various millages. The captures.
And just point of clarification, Keith, we are modeling a 10% admin capture to this, through the BRA.
I don't think we,
So to the extent that you
have-
don't use that, then there's more TIF revenue to pay the developer back more quickly and shorten the duration of the plan. But you have the flexibility.
we hadn't anticipated that, but.
We just assume you always want to pay your staff, so we always start with a 10% fee in the model. Yeah. So I'll add, administering a housing TIF brownfield plan is more work for you all than a regular brownfield plan, because we've got to report annually back to you about, meeting our affordability requirements, and then you would have to then report up to MISTA. So there's some work. So, whether you do that internally as staff or hire a consultant to help you, there's money in the budget for you to deal with that.
That is true. It is much more difficult to manage these than it is your first brownfield. This component adds a lot of work to it.
So at full build out, we're showing about $65,000 a year of capture to the Brownfield Authority for admin purposes, which is, should be able to cover that cost.
There's two questions that I've been corrected on relative to answers. So, but maybe just addressing what the steps are for you, and as much as you're also, because of the gap, having to get MISTA approval.
Yeah, sure. Process question, like sort of what's next. Yeah. So procedurally, anytime there's a brownfield plan, it starts first with the Brownfield Authority. You're being asked to make a recommendation to City Council. Should you make that recommendation to City Council, the city needs to issue a public notice to the taxing jurisdictions at least 10 days ahead of a public hearing that they are required by statute to hold. City Council holds a public hearing. Public's invited to speak. It's pretty rare that the public speaks, in my experience on these, but it's a required step in the process. And then City Council considers a resolution to approve the brownfield plan. At that point in time, if City Council supports the project, now you have the authorization to capture what's up on the screen. The local millage, sort of the middle grouping, is what is controlled by this body and City Council. The next step then is for us to execute our reimbursement agreement with the Brownfield Authority. That's sort of the contract that lays out all the terms and conditions, all of our obligations for reporting and income monitoring, income certification, and what we need to provide to you to document our eligible activities. That all gets laid out in this reimbursement agreement contract. Once that's executed, that's a required attachment to the thing we submit to the state, which is called an Act 381 work plan. It's another document very similar to this brownfield plan, a little bit more expanded, that must be approved by the Michigan State Housing Development Authority to authorize the capture of the school millages. So the top two millages on the table in front of you there. MISHDA's approval process is their general approach here is we need as much housing as the state can build as fast as we can build it. And so they've adopted policy that this brownfield plan is drafted to comply with. And MISHDA has generally taken the approach that as long as you're following our policy, And it's a project that's being supported locally. They're going to be there to support the school tax capture portion of the plan. And that's been our experience as we've been starting to move through our first ones through the Mishta meat grinder. I think we've gotten 5 or 6 of them approved at this point, with a few under review. So that process takes 30 to 60 days to get through their approval. So we got a couple months of sort of administrative steps in the process that then gets us into, being able to break ground in the fall, hopefully. And then I guess the back end, we then go build the project, and then we'll be back in front of you with a reimbursement request upon completion, where we're documenting all of the costs that we incurred, proof of payment, things like that. Hopefully providing our first round of income certified, income qualified tenants, and asking you to approve reimbursement. So you'll be, what the Brownfield plan is doing is setting a ceiling on what's possible here. Ultimately, if we don't incur all the costs that are identified in the plan, we're only being reimbursed for those actual costs that are actually incurred, and approved for reimbursement by you all.
What is the expectation for completion?
We have a 3-year, I think we're showing a 3-year lease up. Probably we're going to build this in 2 or maybe 3 phases, so quite a bit at a time. And then usually once we build it, it doesn't take long to lease up, especially when you try to keep the rates down. So 3 years. Yeah.
The phases mean that you may move somebody into certain sections before you're completed with the entire project.
It just depends how many buildings we build at once. We could build 5 at once or 10 at once, or we just need to decide. Usually once it's built, it fills up within months. So usually there's not a big fill up period for us on this. And one other thing I want to mention as I was sitting here listening to Joe talk, I think one thing we've discovered in working on these projects is that it seems to be a very successful program in that the public aligns with private in this case. I think they're really trying to incentivize workforce housing and housing in general, and that sooner than later. So basically what they're doing with this program is incentivizing developers like myself to build, like get in there, build quicker, than they might normally, because we might go in and build like 2 or 3 with this program, and incentivizes us to build double that at least. So it basically says, we only pay you once you build a building. We only capture the taxes for structures that are on the ground and built in vertical. So we're incentivized to get those structures built in vertical as soon as possible, because that's the TIF incentives, paying property taxes, which then we get reimbursed, only happens once we build. So we get nothing until we build, till we spend the money. And the second part of that, which works well, is that from an investor standpoint for projects like this, to know that these TIF dollars are coming in. So it's kind of it becomes a known commodity. We know we're going to spend $5 million. The investors have assurances that we're going to get some portion of that back, no matter what, even if there's not a resident in there. It's just basically it provides certainty to investors to make it much more attractive to want to spend more money more quickly. So this program is in 2 things: that they're trying to get workforce affordable housing in as quick as possible, and and it provides public monies really, in terms of capture of property taxes that have certainty of payment, which to our investors is a big deal. So it's 2 things that align very well with what we're trying to do here, and it enables us to move quickly and confidently on projects like this that have a TIF associated. I just want to kind of step back for a second and remind me of that.
So I just have to say, from the county's perspective, and I don't set policy at the county, I don't make policy for the county, but $1.6 million for us is a lot. We just took on overnight patrols at a $700,000 a year annual cost. And taking a look at this, we only operate at 4.6 mils. So it's a lot, and it's a big chunk for us. So I also understand the need for workforce housing and to see the community grow too. So, there's a trade-off here.
I will always point out that those are dollars that don't exist today, so that nobody is losing any revenue that is being received today. But your point is well taken. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge with, what we've seen. The reason you're seeing projects like this right now is, this project would have made sense without any incentives 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago for sure. But we've seen construction costs go up 40 or 50% in that time frame. Interest rates have tripled, and rents have maintained fairly constant. So and that's not something that's unique in Coldwater. That's a statewide problem, really, with the exception of Ann Arbor, where rents have gone through the roof. But it's, the math just doesn't work on, old market, traditional market rate projects. So we have sort of the choice that all communities are facing is, do you wait for a deal that doesn't wait for rent to go up enough in your community, where the pain gets so much that the market's willing to pay enough to support a market rate project, and hope during that time that costs don't keep going up, or you put incentive in now to get a project off the ground. But yeah, there's a give and take, right? That has to happen, and your point's well taken.
I think in this project too, we talked about shorter was better. Like we didn't want to come in as a 25-year TIF, like we've done that in a lot of communities. What worked for us here is to have a higher percentage of affordability, because we're trying to keep the rents lower. And again, speed is an incentive for us. So we're going to keep the rents as absolutely low as we can in order to move the apartments. So I think being a 16-year cap, was it 16 total?
16 years.
Yeah, is a good 10 years, is 9 years short of a lot of places we're doing. I think, that's 16 years where you're not going to get all the taxes back, but after year 16, you get 228 units worth of taxes all at once. So I think it's basically putting on pause that 16, those 16 years in order to get the project done pretty much and get some percentage of it, not all. But so I think it's quicker than most we're working on, I will say.
Or most of your units year lease.
We mostly year. I think sometimes we do 6-month leases, but that's kind of the exception. I'd say mostly we try to do. Yep.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No, thank you. What's before the board now is resolution 2502. This would be a resolution to approve the Brownfield board plan as amended, reflecting the current discussion of the slight change in units, and would also be a recommendation for city council to set a public hearing, notify the taxing jurisdictions, and recommend that they consider approval of this plan as well.
I'll make that motion unless there's other discussion.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion?
It's a really difficult issue my apologies to everyone, but we all have our budgets to manage and all of that, and I understand, $1.6 million hit to the county is significant. But again, if you look at it on the other side of it, this project's very important to the community. And without this, we did a development in Meridian Town. We were one of the first ones to do one when it all came out. It was a big deal because of the infrastructure cost that you could not capture with the 1995 law, and it changed, and it was significant. So I understand that, and that project would have not happened without the incentive of the infrastructure being added to the Brownfield. So given all of that, and given the need for the community, I think the need for the community outweighs the loss of taxes to the county, although it is 10% of the entire project. But I understand that I'll be voting in favor of the motion with hesitation for our finances, because I know what a struggle we have, but for the good of the community, I think it's the right thing. And I apologize for all the questions, but we just don't take $1.6 million lightly, and we have to ask the questions and understand. Thank you.
No, and I actually appreciate your questions because you've done this before and I haven't. And as a superintendent of the district, looking at any cuts or any effect to our budgets, in today's day and age is definitely something to think about, but if we could put a caveat in here that at least 200 of the units have kids that will be coming into our district, I'd appreciate that very much if we, lower rent, but more kids. Maybe that could be an incentive. So that for us, that would be the trade-off. If the more kids we get, the better we're getting from our FTEs from the state, so. But I do appreciate your questions.
Thank you. I don't know anything about teachers and school and all that, so we're even.
Any further discussion? Appears none. With that, we'll take a vote. For those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Measure passes. We are now up to public comment. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to be heard, you may approach. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. I don't believe there's any unfinished business that I'm aware of, and no new business.
Amanda, if I may, so I don't know that everybody knows everyone on the board, so maybe we can start and just go around and introduce.
Sure, we do have a relatively recent appointment. If you'd like to introduce yourself to the rest of
And
the
who
board.
and who you represent, and then we'll go around the board.
Sure. Yeah, I'm replacing Chris Jenkins as the new superintendent for Branch Intermediate School District, and I'm Darren Adair.
But not until tomorrow, right?
Not until tomorrow's the official
day.
day.
I'm Paul Flynn. I'm superintendent of Coldwater Community Schools.
My name's Caroline Lau and I'm a local CPA.
Okay,
I'm Frank Walsh. I'm the county administrator. Nice to meet you.
You too.
Eric Beckhusen with, one of the local community banks.
But Norman, I like to think that I represent everyone. Not everybody agrees with that, but.
And retired county administrator, but, and having familiarity with this, and you didn't want to make a plug for Century Bank. So. And then Amanda is our city attorney. She took over, but didn't introduce herself, and then Keith Baker, the city manager, so.
And Sean.
and
Sean-
newly appointed recording secretary, Shauna.
Yeah.
All right, well, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody.
See you again.
Rival, always try to get